Alright everyone, Wednesday morning, I hope you're all well. Let's talk about Celtic, I guess. And let's focus on transfers again today, and sincere apologies to user Jimmy Johnson, who probably speaks for a lot of you and isn't a fan of transfer chat. He commented in saying, "It's difficult to get interested in the signing saga. I will wait and see who actually signs by the deadline. Speculation is pointless. Fills your videos, I suppose." Now, I totally get that. I get that many of you watching this aren't a fan of transfer chat, transfer rumours, and would much rather we just spoke about players who were actually contracted to Celtic and didn't speak about new signings until they were officially announced by the club. As I say, I get that, and we get comments like that, you know, I wouldn't say very often, but occasionally. I think the reality is that a lot of people really enjoy the transfer chat as well, and it just depends what kind of person you are. To be honest, like before I kind of got into talking about Celtic, I wasn't a big fan of transfer talk, but as I've kind of, as I say, been talking about Celtic on 67 Hail Hail previously, the Celtic Way at the moment on here, and when I was writing about it on 67hailhail.com, great website by the way, still going, anchored by my good mate John McGinley. Those were always the busiest months every single year were during the transfer window. So it's very obvious that a lot of people live for transfer rumours. It's their Christmas, I guess, although it lasts a good bit longer than Christmas. So that's basically where we're at with all of this stuff. One thing that I try and do on this channel, and to be honest at 67 Hail Hail as well, is to just keep things as credible as possible. I don't just report absolute nonsense from daft sources. I try and use like trusted journalists who have kind of been known to get things right about Celtic in the past, who are known to have links to people inside the club, and obviously local journalists as well, like in other nations, if it's a player linked with Celtic, because you kind of get to know what feels right and what doesn't. Basically what I'm saying is the one thing I will never do is just bring up, you know, and chat about transfer stuff with absolutely no credible link and just based on rumours and hearsay and chat between people in pubs and taxis and stuff like that. I will never ever do that, okay? Right, Odsonne Edouard to Celtic then. Yeah, this is one that is growing arms and legs, but as far as I can see, there is actually nothing of real substance here. Perhaps it's all fueled by Edouard's appearance at the Hydro last month at the Celtic end of season awards. I know that some people have spoken to feel that Edouard was perhaps testing the waters and seeing what kind of reaction he would get from the Celtic support. To be honest, unless I'm kind of misremembering anything, I don't think he should be getting anything other than a really good reaction. I mean, Edouard was a great player for us. I know it didn't end particularly well during the COVID season, but as we know, nothing was really going right at the club or in the world that year. And I know he wasn't particularly amazing in the early weeks under Ange Postecoglou. I remember a game against Hearts, he was pretty good in the cup at Celtic Park. But generally, it wasn't an amazing end to his career at Celtic. But over those, whatever it was, 3 or 4 seasons that he was at the club, he was a very good signing. He should be remembered very fondly. Now, he signed a 4-year deal at Crystal Palace when he joined them in the summer of 2021. So that means that his contract is up, not this summer, but next summer. So maybe that's part of it as well. People realise that his contract is up pretty soon. And usually at this point, 12 months to go. Doesn't seem like Crystal Palace under Oliver Glasner are going to want to keep him on. They'll probably be aiming for maybe a better forward. Edouard hasn't done spectacularly bad at Palace over the past few years, but he hasn't exactly done brilliantly either. I don't think he actually was starting very much last season. So yeah, is he going to leave Palace this summer? Probably. Would he want to return to Celtic, and would Celtic want to sign him? Well, I guess the first part of that, I would guess no. I would guess that Edouard would feel that he'd done his time in Scotland and would be looking to play in quite simply a better quality league than the Scottish Premiership. He won't be short of offers. I mean, you think of the kind of profile he's got in France, you would think there'd be a number of teams in that league, League One, that would be interested in taking Edouard. There'll probably be other offers from other leagues as well. Would Celtic and Brendan Rodgers be keen to bring him back to the club? Well, it's all about space. We've obviously got Kyogo there as a forward. O's there as well. I would expect O to leave this summer, whether that's on loan or permanently. As I've said, I hope it's a loan. Rodgers has made no secret of the fact he wants to bring Adam Ida back to the club. And I'm very much of the opinion that with Kyogo and hopefully Ida on our books, there may not necessarily be room for someone like Edouard. Now, I know people will be watching this going straight away, you can never have enough good players, Hamish, and, you know, we kind of need 3 strikers for this to work, Hamish. I agree with the whole you can never have enough good players, but I actually think if we were to sign someone like Odsonne Edouard and Adam Ida, it would probably do more harm to Ida's development and game time and all of that stuff than it would good. By the way, Ida scored a pretty emphatic header for the Republic of Ireland last night. They beat Hungary right between the posts, met across perfectly. He just seems to be... He seems to be a really good forward, Adam Ida, much better than I think a lot of us, you know, certainly gave him credit for when he joined the club. And I think even at this stage, I think there's so much more, so much potential in Adam Ida, and I think most importantly Brendan Rodgers sees that. So really hoping we sign him. We actually had a bit of certainly a hypothetical debate on the Celtic way last night, where I raised the point, you know, if Adam Ida and Odsonne Edouard were both keen to come to Celtic this summer and you can only pick one, who would you go for? And I think it's genuinely quite a difficult question to answer. Edouard, you know, I would say is a better quality player than Ida at the moment, but I think Ida certainly has more room for improvement than Edouard does. I think Ida's going to kind of rise a lot over the coming years. Edouard's probably playing it near his peak, which is not a bad peak at all. But I just think the whole argument of Ida would be coming into the club on a high. Edouard hasn't necessarily had that high in recent months, and there's a whole debate about not going back, etc. So what do you think, Ida or Edouard? As I say, it's hypothetical. I don't actually think Celtic are interested in Edouard at all. I don't think Edouard is actually that interested in coming back to the club. Listen, I could be wrong. It may be the case that Edouard's someone we've got our eye on as like a kind of backup option if Ida doesn't come back to the club, and maybe if for whatever reason we can't get a deal done for Ida and Edouard's unable to find a club and wants more regular game time and wants a kind of home again, that may be something that comes into play later in the month. But I think at this moment, Rodgers will want to sign Ida more than anyone else as that forward. Whether we sign a third striker, whether it remains this coming season, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know if this will be a controversial take again. I actually think you can function with just Kyogo and Ida as your 2 forwards for the season. I think you've always got Dice and Maida there as a third option if the time was to come where both were injured. And I just think that, like, how often did we actually see O in the second half of last season? He barely played, so do you really need a third option? As I say, you're always going to get injuries, and Kyogo is going to have injuries at some point next season, and if we sign Ida, he's going to miss time as well. But I just think if you get those two, I'm actually relatively happy there. I just fear if you bring a third player in, what kind of game time are they going to get? And if they do get game time, is that going to be at the expense of someone like Ida? So personally for me, next season, if we have Kyogo, we have Ida, and we've always got someone like Dice and Maida, who I know is not a striker, but he can certainly play there as a third option. I'm kind of happy with that. But yeah, Odsonne Edouard, I don't see it happening. You can let me know what you think of what I've said in the comments, whether you think he's a player we should bring back. He was a terrific player for us. I just... I just probably prefer we went down the Ida road, and to be honest, I don't even think that's much of a debate for Celtic right now. I'm pretty sure Rodgers wants to sign Ida and probably hasn't really even thought about Edouard at all. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it regardless. Where are we then overall with the kind of transfer stuff? Things are pretty quiet on most fronts. It seems like Norwich's new boss, Johannes Hoff Torup, will want to take a look at Ida. I would hope at this stage that Ida is pretty set on a move to Celtic. I would hope that he and Brendan Rodgers have had conversations, and it's basically a case of Rodgers saying to Ida, look, do you want to come back? Ida saying yes, and then Rodgers saying, right, trust me with this one. I'll speak to the board and we'll get this done. And I think there's probably a fair bit of truth in that. Obviously, Ida's never going to come out publicly while he's a Norwich City player and say, yeah, I want to sign for Celtic, I need to be there. But I think, behind closed doors, he'll have made it clear to Rodgers. And I think Rodgers, wants to sign him. And it's up to the Celtic board now to back the manager and make a big statement signing. Certainly seems like Paulo Bernardo will be on his way back to the club. I reckon that a deal could be concluded there over the next few weeks. I know that the transfer window opens on June the 14th. We can still announce the signing before then. We just can't register any player before June the 14th. But it's not as if we have any matches between now and then anyway. So I reckon that will be announced over the next couple of weeks. It certainly seems to be the way things are heading, and I'm not going to touch on Bernardo today because we've done that on numerous videos in the past. Now, Scott Burns in the Daily Record recently claimed Celtic are advancing on a number of fronts, including a new goalkeeper. We've had a number of names linked with us already. I think most of them aren't going to happen for whatever reason, whether they've been rejected by Celtic, rejected by the club that the player plays for, or whether the player's just going elsewhere, like the Belgian goalkeeper Castells. I don't know if he's actually permanently been announced as a signing for whatever Saudi Arabian team it was, but it seems like that's not going to happen. I get the feeling that, and this may be a very obvious thing to say, we're going to know when the report emerges. I think so far we've had a number of names. I'm not necessarily sure any of them are the goalkeeper we're going to see as our number one next season. I think that name may still be to come. And I think when we get that report, we'll kind of know pretty quickly this is the guy who Celtic want, and things may be pretty far down the line at that stage. I think Celtic will be very clear on who it is we want to sign. And it's just a case of the media getting a hold of that name. And obviously, as fans, we kind of want to know, but also I'm happy for Celtic just to work in the background. The club will clearly be doing that as we speak. And again, I could be wrong, but I get this feeling that it might be a European goalkeeper that we go for this time. We've not had too many of them over the past couple of decades, really. Certainly as our number ones, I can only really think of Barkas and Boric. Obviously one worked out extremely well, one didn't. I just get the sense that might be the way the club go with this, but that's not based on anything at all. That's just a feeling that I get. Chat about a left back as well. I say chat, there hasn't been any real names floated this summer that I can remember so far. I think one thing that is worth noting is that the majority of the club signings in recent transfer windows have been players with international experience, even if that's as a youth international. It's something Stephen McGowan touched on in a report probably a couple of weeks ago now, and I looked at it, and I'm not sure if it's something he's just looked at from looking at the players we've signed, or whether it's something that he's been told about from people at the club. But it's very obvious when you look at the players we've signed that Celtic have aimed to bring in players with some sort of international experience. Just thinking kind of off the top of my head earlier, Yang, Johnston, Palma, Lagerbielke, Haksabanovic, Ida, and then even kind of youth players like Tilio Home and Bernardo all have some sort of international experience, and I just wonder if that will be part of what we go for at left back. this summer. So it may be worth keeping an eye on various teams playing at Euro 2024 and Copa America 2024. Remember, we signed Alistair Johnson, I think, during a World Cup, and that came about very quickly as a replacement for Josip Juranovic. So I think that's something worth keeping an eye on. But just generally, if we get Adamida in, Paulo Bernardo in, the goalkeeper sorted nice and early, I think that's very important, and ideally a left back in as well. I think we can all relax a little bit. There'll still be a few positions I think that we want to bring players in. I think, another midfielder potentially, certainly if O'Reilly moves on, you'd want another winger as well. I think many people, including myself, would want a centre back in as well. But I think the priorities here, and it may not work like this, but the priorities would be to get Ida and Bernardo back to the club, get a goalkeeper sorted and get a left back sorted, and then from that point we can kind of relax a little bit. We'll know we've done the really important stuff, and then can kind of look at other positions. So I'm hoping that's how things go. I think the club will be working very hard as we speak. Well, sorry, not literally as I speak, because they'll be sleeping. In fact, I hope they're not sleeping at all at the moment. I hope they're up all night trying to work out who we should be signing. But yeah, I think, they will be working hard. Conversations will, be happening. And as I say, it's just about us fans finding out what road we're going to go down with these players. But yeah, generally, I find transfer stuff quite exciting. I love just thinking about where the club can improve next season. I think we've got a real good base of players at the club. It's just about a few key positions, upgrading that, improving the general squad as well. But I think rather than bringing in, squad players to improve the squad, what you should be doing is trying to sign players better than the players you've already got, or at least players who can, go head-to-head 50-50 with current first-team players. I think that's how you improve the squad. Say we sign someone better than Greg Taylor, and then Greg Taylor maybe becomes more of a sub than he has been over the past couple of years. That's a much better way to do it than to sign an understudy for Greg Taylor. And I think you do the same in a number of positions. So yeah, this has kind of been me rambling on a little bit, transfer chat, but plenty to consider. No video tomorrow, by the way, just give you a heads up for that. Find a way to get through your Thursday without me talking nonsense at 7:30 or whatever time you watch in the morning. We'll be back on Friday though, so chat to you then.